Have you been the victim of verbal and emotional abuse while patronizing a store? Were you unable to exit public transit because a mob of people rushed the entrance, blocking your path instead of waiting for people to get off? Did a boomer cut you off in traffic or at the grocery checkout line, invading your personal space due to their indifference? Fear not, because you may be entitled to financial restitution. Not legally, because I'm not an actual lawyer, and I can't force anyone to pay you for just, being in your way and being rude. Sorry. All right, got that monkey suit off. It always felt like this sort of thing happened around the holidays, but it seems like it's just commonplace now. I was hopeful that we would return to acting with some kind of respect in the new year instead of climbing over each other on the subway like zombies in The Last of Us. Unfortunately, people are and have always been kinda just the worst when venturing out in public. Self-awareness, personal space, boundaries. These concepts don't seem to be a consideration anymore when visiting a coffee shop or just walking down the street. The person not looking where they're walking is in the wrong here, by the way. Other people are trying to fucking commute and run errands, and you're in the way filming a stupid TikTok video, much like I am right now. And if TikTok is at all to be trusted about trending topics, there's been a noticeable increase in rude behaviors, with many users posting their experiences with strangers who have collectively said fuck it to public etiquette and common courtesy, who are either suffering from main character syndrome or the effects of long-term lead exposure. Some people blame the loss of etiquette and social awareness on the pandemic, but I don't think that's fully to blame, because it was happening long before we were all forced to stay indoors for 2 years straight, or 3 years, or maybe for the rest of all time. It does feel like it's gotten a lot worse since, I'll admit that, and as someone who's worked service jobs all my life, I can't tell you how brain dead the average pedestrian or shopper is. I recently got into a slight physical altercation with some random 48-year-old who had some real balls to shove me when I accidentally bumped into him while trying to pass him on the sidewalk, similar to that earlier video, and it's been grinding my gears ever since. If anything, this video is just a call to action to just not be a dick in public and to take note of how your behavior might be perceived by those around you. We're just trying to get to a job we hate, or a doctor's appointment, or a fucking funeral, man. I think it's important to talk about and dissect the phenomenon, because we all have to go to Walgreens or use public transit every once in a while. Except for people like Elon Musk. This stuff will never affect the ultra wealthy. I also don't want to entirely disregard post-pandemic behavior either, as there have been surveys and studies of increased rude behavior since. Good firms suggest these changes in behavior can be indirectly linked to shifts in social norms and expectations over the years. With the threat of contracting a deadly disease compounded by the ever-rising threat of economic collapse and the deterioration of individual purchasing power, people have a more utilitarian mindset. I'm also fully aware that seeing the price of a sack of potatoes is enough to make anyone want to firebomb their local Safeway, but please don't take it out on the employees working minimum wage or your fellow customers. Firebomb one of the CEO's vacation homes instead. During the early days of the pandemic, I went so far as to buy MREs and D batteries and a lantern and put together a go bag because I had no idea what was gonna happen. I also buried a sack of gold coins in my backyard and now sleep with a machete tucked between my mattress, so don't fuck with me. It's pretty anecdotal, but the amount of stories like this make me think that interactions in public spaces and retail environments have become more transactional and less social. Some of this I blame on the absolute failure of most brands prior to the pandemic to provide an experience that's worth the trip to your brick and mortar, as well as so many businesses being located where people work, not where they live. Many brands have for years relied on name recognition to get customers to shop, or they've foolishly believed their product is so good and cool that they don't need to put the extra effort into making an experience out of shopping. But that's a whole other topic of conversation. The pandemic also led to an increase in online shopping, with 69.4% of respondents in that same survey reporting an uptick in their online shopping activities. This change in shopping, along with a shift to buying local, is a clear sign of a broader transformation in consumer habits and preferences that companies haven't figured out how to take advantage of and capitalize on besides adding a curbside pickup option. You can compare products much more easily online and take your time shopping around to find the best deal, even if that deal is for an acrylic sweater that costs $5 from Shein that is basically wearable trash that won't last through winter. When you get accustomed to quick, impulse purchases, it can be annoying to actually have to roll out of bed, get dressed, and physically go to a store to see and touch what you're about to buy in order to make sure it's not some flimsy, cheap plastic garbage. It could also be a sign of the effects of lead poisoning among boomers. You know, the people that still have some purchasing power and who are the majority of the perpetrators in those Karen videos who act like a toddler throwing a tantrum because their mommy didn't buy them a SpongeBob balloon. Consumers and employees alike had to learn how to navigate new health protocols that varied widely between stores and municipalities upon venturing into the very scary outdoors again. Old people, in particular, seem to have the hardest time, I assume, because they're afraid of change, and also millennials with septum piercings and purple hair, which shouldn't really be a problem since so many old women apply blue rinse to their hair in order to cancel out that nasty yellow coloration that happens as you age. You can make the argument that it's also due to a heightened sense of entitlement among those who feel they deserve certain treatment after years of social distancing at home, or if they're of a more conspiratorial mind, interned by a corrupt government run by lizard people. I can't talk about rude behavior in public spaces without also discussing what appears to be a correlation between the erratic behavior of boomers who can't understand how a refund is processed and lead exposure among their generation. There's a variety of cognitive and behavioral issues associated with lead exposure, such as loss of self-control, shortened attention span, and learning disorders that are all byproducts of lead poisoning. And whatever this is. In children, these effects are documented at blood lead levels, BLLs, not BBLs, once thought to be safe, including those below 10 micrograms per deciliter, or, to put it in perspective, because we don't use the Dewey Decimal System over here, a speck of sugar so small you can barely see it in about 3.3 ounces of liquid. In adults, there are less severe neurological and behavioral effects when exposed to higher levels ranging from 40 to 120 micrograms. But when looking back at how prominent lead was almost 5 decades ago, you quickly realize an entire generation was being exposed to way more than 40 or 120 micrograms throughout the day. And before the phase out of leaded gasoline in the 70s, gas typically contained up to 4 grams of lead per gallon that would be released into the atmosphere either by combustion or just as evaporated fumes. None of this takes into account things like leaded pipes, canned food, soldering, or cosmetics that were produced around the same time that your Meemaw was slathering all over her face for a bingo night out. It's worth noting that saying someone ate paint chips as a kid used to be a pretty common insult for when someone did something dumb.
Did you eat a lot of paint chips when you were a kid? Why?
Why would a child eat paint chips, you may ask? Because lead has a sweet taste and children are stupid. And manufacturers are still using lead in some of their processing, like those Stanley mugs the TikTok girlies were going apeshit for, so there's still a risk to current generations. Just a couple weeks ago, La Fiesta had to recall their cinnamon for containing high levels of lead. And I'm always confused when food products end up with something like toxic metal in it. Well, are they manufacturing Stanley mugs in the same factory as cinnamon? How? Why? The effects of lead poisoning include depression, diminished cognitive performance, irritability, dullness, loss of memory, poor attention span, and what TikTok now refers to as the lead paint stare. I've dealt with older customers who checked several of these boxes over the decades of being employed as a cashier and a server and a sales associate, where I've had to tell 60-year-olds, they're acting like children when they start foaming at the mouth like Old Yeller when simply informing them of the company's return policy. Beyond just rude behavior in stores or interacting with employees, there are also the small courtesies that are completely non-existent today. I don't know when, but sometime in the last few years, the idea of personal space has gone out the window.
The decline of common courtesy is so bad. This weekend, I was at the grocery store, and the bagger at the end of the checkout lane is finishing up with my groceries. I become very aware that the guy behind me is getting extremely close to me. Like, I can feel it. And then he gets even closer. Like, I'm talking inches, but there is nowhere for me to go. Then the guy literally reaches over my shoulder, brushes his reusable bags against the side of my head to set them down at the end of the checkout lane. And in that moment, I kind of snapped, and I turned around and I was like, are you in a rush? Like, nothing is gonna happen with your groceries until mine are done, dude. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish.
This happens to me all the time while I'm waiting to check out, where someone, typically of boomer age, will line up behind me and be almost standing on my heels, giving me a flat tire like I'm back in middle school. My parents always imparted on me the importance of things like personal space, patience, and general chivalry when out in public, so it blows my mind how oblivious people from the same generation have become. Even before 6-foot social distancing, things weren't this bad. I've started having my groceries delivered to me because I want to avoid public spaces like the plague, because there is a plague, and also because people are disgusting animals who cough like toddlers and are always touching their faces. Some people in the comments of that video just brush it off as NPC behavior, but that feels a little reductive and dehumanizing to me. These people are just rude, selfish dipshits. I've tried to live by the tenet of always saying please and thank you, but man, it's getting real hard to continue believing in that when it's not reciprocated and nothing changes. I've always felt that spreading positivity through doing things like opening a door for someone or giving up your seat on a crowded bus might brighten someone else's otherwise shitty day. But it's mentally draining to put that out there and then get harassed or treated like dog shit. Like, what is this all even for? At the same time, I also don't want to stop doing it and become a dick just out of spite, because then I'm no better than the uncaring Karens. No one should turn to spite and become a bitter asshole just because other people didn't say please and thank you.
I've lived in big cities and in small towns, and even in a place where I live now in Birmingham, which is over 1 million people, you know, it's a good sized city. You still run into people that you know or that know you. And I think that helps us, especially in the South, maintain that common courtesy and that social contract, because if you are rude to somebody, the chances are they know somebody that you know, they know your parents, or they go to church with somebody, or they work with somebody, and it's going to get back to people you know that you were an asshole to somebody. But when I lived in the big cities, it's easy to forget that social contract and that common courtesy to people, because you'll see people you'll never see again.
There's a level of anonymity in a city with hundreds of thousands or millions of people that diminish any immediate social consequences of one's actions, leading to a reduction in superficially nice behavior dictated by social expectations. People always say how New Yorkers aren't nice, they're kind, and it's important to point out the distinction. Kindness is inherently linked to empathy, and empathetic individuals are more likely to engage in kind behaviors over nice ones, like taking part in small talk and asking how your family is when in reality you couldn't give a shit. This sense of empathy often leads to actions that are more meaningful and impactful, transcending the surface level of being merely nice. Kindness, on the other hand, takes more effort, as it usually means doing something selfless in exchange for experiencing a small inconvenience yourself, like giving away a seat on a bus. That being said, while holding a door open for someone might just be a nice perfunctory act, that doesn't mean you just shouldn't do it. Being a jerk just ruins someone else's day, and it takes literally no effort to do it or treat people with basic dignity and respect. Talking about nice versus kind makes me think that as small towns have grown, older folks are experiencing this change and have yet to adapt to said anonymity and shifting attitudes about the difference between the two acts, and end up conflating nice with kind. They might find it challenging to adapt to this new anonymity and further confuse it with rude behavior, when in reality, it's just that we all have shit going on and are probably working multiple jobs and can't stop to chit-chat, Linda. You're retired, and I'm sorry you have nothing else going on, but I have to get home to feed my cats. Otherwise, they're gonna die because I've been at work for 8 hours and have an hour commute one way. I don't have a lot of time outside of this to, live my life. In small town settings, being nice was often synonymous with being kind because social interactions were deeply personal and intertwined with community well-being. This degree of interpersonal engagement and kindness are simply no longer common, but more importantly, practical. When these expectations are not met, it can lead to perceptions that the community is going to hell and deteriorating when it's just gentrification. Not to suggest gentrification is good and doesn't negatively affect certain people while disproportionately benefiting others. It's just that the nature of social interactions has simply evolved. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, and the adjustment to a new social paradigm is challenging for older individuals who have spent their lives in a stable, unchanging bubble, who also maybe have holes in their brain from all that lead. The rapid pace of change can create a sense of dislocation and nostalgia for a perceived more authentic connections of the past, which is also probably why you hear so many boomers pining for the good old days. The good old days for whomst, Linda. Speaking about entitlement, a lot of these people who lack common courtesy are also the ones who throw around the saying, the customer is always right, as if that entitles them to make the most buck wild requests and demands. They don't understand that when you enter a private business, you're also on private property and must abide by whatever rules they have in place. We all see the no shoes, no shirt, no service sign at bodegas and gas station convenience stores and don't bat an eye. But when Grandpa Larry wants his money back well beyond the designated return window, he freaks out and wants to talk to the manager.
I want to talk to the manager. Okay, 1 second. Hi, how can I help you? What the is your problem? I just my problem.
They think the saying, the customer is always right, supersedes the business's legal right to refuse service to anyone. When you enter any business, you're not trespassing until you are. Just because a place is open to the public doesn't mean you become a part owner the moment you walk in. We need to put an immediate moratorium on that saying, and if you hear anyone use it, I don't know, probably time to put them in a retirement home. Beyond invading personal space and degrading service workers because you're afraid of change, so many people walk around the sidewalk like it was paved for them specifically. We call this main character syndrome nowadays, but you could just call it narcissism, selfishness, or being a major pain in my ass. Move it, Grandpa! If you're walking on a sidewalk, don't walk shoulder to shoulder in a perpendicular line like you're playing Red Rover with oncoming strangers. Ooh! Move over into a single file line. Another thing that bothers me to no end is people not understanding how to enter or exit public transit. And I'd also like to point out that before you even get to the train and you're on the escalator headed to the platform, stand to the right and let people walking down on the left pass you. It's the same rules as when you're on the highway. Slower vehicles to the right, passing vehicles to the left. And in no particular order, here are some other things we need to start doing again out of common courtesy. Don't stand in what is an obvious walking path. Do look your server in the eye when ordering. Abide by the zipper rule when merging. And turn your headlights on when it's raining or foggy or overcast or dawn or dusk. Show up 15 minutes early to an appointment. Don't overstay your welcome. Take your headphones out and put your phone away in a group setting. Don't play music on the bus or have a loud conversation. And when someone asks you how you're doing, do not, I repeat, do not trauma dump on them. I was just being polite. To close this out, I'd say be wary of boomers with the lead paint stare because they're gonna make you cry at your minimum wage service job. But more importantly, don't give up on being kind or even nice despite the implied superficiality. It just might make someone's day. I do think we've lost something in our ability to communicate when someone slights us on the sidewalk, and the knee-jerk reaction to physically or verbally assault a stranger or just tell them to suck it up is not an option. On the flip side, people go around living their life as if their decisions and actions have no repercussions and do not affect the lives of those around them, which proves that people lack some basic self-awareness nowadays. None of us live in a vacuum, and it's hard to convince people to be more aware of their surroundings and themselves, or how external factors influence those things. I don't really know what the answer is, but just being more present and empathetic is a start, and the next time a 70-year-old purple-haired lunatic begins ranting and raving incoherently, just tell yourself, it's probably lead poisoning. That's the video. Thanks so much for watching, and if you made it this far, that means you're special. Be sure you like and comment and subscribe. Turn on those notifications, because I'm always in the community section, giving updates about the channel. You can also become a member for $3 a month. I've got some exclusive content for just you guys that's available there. And follow me on Instagram, where I post memes and more updates about the channel. Until next time, vanish.